Maybe you've heard the news. The Great Barrier Reef is dead. Today we talk about how dangerous that statement is, as the reef is still very much alive and there is so much worth saving. It's true we are at a turning point, but doom and gloom won't save our oceans. Today we introduce you to John Rumny, who dedicated his life to the conservation of these magnificent ecosystems, and discuss what is coral bleaching, what causes it, and furthermore, what you can personally do to help minimize your impact. This is the story of a sailboat named Sylvia and the ragtag crew that call her home. Join us each week as we explore the planet both above and below the surface, and see what it's really like to live a life at sea. This is Expedition Drenched.
My name is John Rumny, and for the last 42 years I have lived and breathed the Great Barrier Reef. It is every part of me, and I love it as if it were family. After this year's bleaching event, I just had to check in on an old friend. They call it the Monolith, and it's the largest single coral colony I have ever seen anywhere on Earth. It is estimated to be between 1 and 2,000 years old, extends 25 meters in depth, and is about 12 meters wide. What I saw shocked me. It has never looked like this before. The monolith was actually glowing. Right before my eyes, this living structure was suffering. Trapped on the reef, it had happily called home for so many centuries, and now was slowly dying in the warmer than normal waters that had until this moment nourished it with everything that it needed since it was a single coral polyp, the size of a pinhead. In the last 6 months, I have seen the Great Barrier Reef undergo its toughest challenge yet, as coral bleaching has taken its toll on corals mostly in the north, where I am now. But this is different. It really hit me. To see the monolith, the oldest coral colony I know, its existence now hanging in the balance. Make no mistake, what we are seeing here is a global warning. In a single breath, I understand now that I have to act, that we all have to act, to save the Great Barrier Reef and reefs worldwide from ourselves. I am 66 years old. After more than 1,000 years, I honestly wonder now if the monolith can outlast me. I'll check back with you soon, old friend. While many people feel helpless about what to do, we have a plan. Please join us at Great Barrier Reef Legacy if you too want to help. There are no barriers too great to saving our reefs.
All right, we've got a special guest today at Expedition Drenched. John Rumny is a local legend. He's like the grandfather of the Minke Whales. He's been at the Great Barrier Reef for 45 years, taking researchers out on his boat, facilitating research expeditions, and he's basically an expert on coral restoration and conservation and Minke whales. So let's meet this guy.
Hello. Well, thank you very much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be speaking with you all.
First up, I heard you won an important award.
It was very nice, yes. Australian Geographic presented me with a Lifetime Achievement in Conservation, and it was a very nice thing to be given, but it's really the outcomes of the conservation that makes me proud.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you're also the founder of the Great Barrier Reef Legacy.
Yes, and the Great Barrier Reef Legacy was formed out of the need to try to make positive outcomes and find solutions to the threats to corals around the world. So we have a couple of slogans, and one is, together there are no barriers too great to save our reefs. and the other is science for solutions. So it does mean we want conservation and advocacy, but the real thing, it needs to be based on evidence-based research and what we can do today.
With both sadness and joy, we're pleased to tell you that the Monolith did, in fact, outlive John, and today we're here to check up on his reef for him.
Okay, so you were telling me about your biobank projects.
Yes, well, this is a very important project, and it's evolving out of the fact that the health of coral reefs around the world are declining. So originally we were fighting for water quality, reduce agricultural runoff, urban development, clearing of mangroves, and those are all still really important. But now with the warming temperatures and the acidification of the oceans, we're having mass negative effect on corals. And they are, the building blocks of the whole biodiversity of 1/4 of the life species in the ocean. Right now we're losing the ice, we're losing the kelp borers, but losing the coral reefs is imperative to hundreds of millions of people's food supply. And it's also the building block, and also the sign that we are finally killing the ocean to a point that we cannot ignore. So the coral biobank is trying to get live specimens of all the corals, first here on the Great Barrier Reef, but then around the world, so that we can hold into the future until we have dealt with the climate issues and the water temperature rising, and start to do science and see how to do restoration and that. So this is an asset for all future coral science, but it's also the start to replant in the future when we have dealt with the threats. So right now our biggest threat is the increasing in water temperature, and because of that we've had 3 major bleaching events on the Barrier Reef in the last 5 years, and we've had them back before that, 98, 2003, but they happened and then recovered. Even though I was seeing it, I was aware of it, I was going, oh yeah, it's recovered. So I feel bad that I failed to recognize the importance of the catastrophic events about to be unfolded. So the Living Coral Biobank is, again, it's not just getting one in one place. Like what's happened in almost all major research institutes or universities is they have something special, and then there's a power failure or a cyclone, something that then that whole 5 years of research, whatever, has boom, collapsed. Yeah. So we need to not only collect them all, we need to distribute them so we still have a guaranteed supply of living coral of all the species. So what's really exciting is that we have partners with in the collecting industry, with aquariums, but also with recreational aquarium people, like home aquarists. The amazing thing is that corals have almost an indefinite life. I've been out diving and been with corals that are 1,000 years old, 2,000 years old. So as long as they have clean water, sunlight, and a few trace elements, then they can live pretty much indefinitely. And they bud, and they duplicate. So we can then take that one, which is a pure genetic stock, of everything that makes that a living complex organism. So we can then distribute those to aquariums around the world. When we want to, we can call those genetic species back, and then either replant them or do the research. So, and that's a lot of words, but it's a fantastic visionary project. Just because the coral is white does not mean it's dead. It's bleaching. It's under, it's sent out its algae, and it's hoping the conditions get better so it can reabsorb. If that continues too long, then the coral will die, and once it's dead, then algae, turf algae, external algae will settle and start growing on it. It becomes very weed-like. And once the whole area is like that, it's very hard to come back because there's no place for a new coral to settle. Now, there's certain areas in the world where they've fished out all the herbivores that eat the algae. And then those reefs now have been lost for 40 years and non-recoverable. So it's important to have fish management in addition to all the other aspects. And again, issues like water quality, agricultural runoff, they are also negative impacts on the health of the reef. So we need to basically improve best practice in many fields, solid waste, agricultural runoff, stormwater drain management, so that the water is as pure as it can be, which is what corals want. So, and many governments around the world are mitigating these negative impacts, but we now have to mitigate the big picture, which is the fossil fuel emissions. If the corals reef fail, and you lose these species to extinction, then that's pretty catastrophic. Whereas if we have this seed bank, we can regenerate, and yes, it's not going to be the same thing for 100 or 1,000 years, but it can come back as a starting point. If we don't deal with this warming temperatures of the oceans, we're going to have hundreds of millions of refugees starving. Every day they go out and they catch their fish, and they're living on an island. That whole food security is now under threat. So this is one simple thing, and it's very cost effective. It's not that hard. Like for a couple $1 million, we can save all the corals of the world. You can get behind this. Everybody can help. Just look at Great Barrier Reef Legacy, and you can go to the Coral Biobank Project and have a look and see what you think.
Got our last bit of laundry. We are about to head out from the Great Barrier Reef out to Osprey, which is like a far off reef, like way out there. I think 80 miles outside of the Great Barrier Reef is Osprey Reef, just a reef that comes out of nowhere. And I can feel the energy, the crew's excited, I'm excited. It's supposed to be sharky and all sorts of awesome things that are gonna happen out there. We're actually gonna pull off this mooring at 9 p.m. tonight. We're gonna head out there, do an overnight so that we get there bright and early in the morning. So, yeah, let's go sailing, huh?
See the breaking waves of the reef right there. Woo! We're making our way through the really narrow pass, and you can see where the waves are breaking on the reef. Only maybe 150, 200 meters off our port side, and all the swell from the open ocean is just backing up onto the shallow reef right on our side, and we're just getting rocked and thrown around, and it's big seas. It's the first time in a while that I've felt a little bit uncomfortable on Sylphia, and it's a bit unsettling for sure.
You have enough bringing in the mail?
So we clear the reef?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are we doing here?
We will pull the main a little bit in because we are losing speed. So, and let's see, we can do it a little bit better because the wind angle wants to change a little bit. So, let's see.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's time for some hot chocolates on this rolly, windy, crazy night on Sylphia. Pretty excited about it.
I don't know if this is better or worse. Maybe it's worse. Because now the cup's like moving more.
People just have to hold it.
Yeah, maybe holding it is easiest.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Tell us about the situation.
It's windy. It's windy and it's shifty. And it's wavy. So, but we adjusted the sails a bit. Now we're hitting 7-8 knots. So I'm happy.
Now we have like between 17 and 25 knots of wind. We still have, what do we have out?
We've got full jib and the main.
At the main. We are going and it's like 6-7 knot average, but our course is good. And the sky is clear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what do you think about Great Barrier Reef so far?
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's perfect. So, like, every reef is full of life and alive. And supposedly Osprey Reef coming up is like a lot more untouched. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's 80 miles, like, more or less away from the main reef. So super pumped to see that. Looking for sharks, looking for manta rays, hopefully.
Coral bleaching occurs when the water temperature is too high or the UV light is too strong, which stresses the corals. And when that happens, the algae that lives inside the coral is called zooxanthellae, and it becomes toxic. And so the coral actually expel it from its body. And zooxanthellae is what gives coral its color. So without it, it looks white or bleached. So that's where the term coral bleaching comes from.
Here on Sylvia we have different kind of sunscreens. One, for example, which one do you have?
I have Sun Butter sunscreen, which is locally made in Exmouth, Australia. It's SPF 50, and what's really important is that it's reef safe, so when we go snorkeling and diving, we're not damaging the coral reef. It's vegan, palm oil free, there's no parabens, and look how much we've used already. We love this product. Good news is that there are places around the world that are starting to ban sunscreens with these damaging chemicals, like in Key West, Hawaii, and Palau have all banned them. So that's good that, you know, our governments are starting to recognize it.
Next time on Expedition Drenched, we head to Osprey Reef, 80 nautical miles out of sight of the Great Barrier Reef, and we experience our hardest week on Sylvia yet and squeeze in an amazing shark dive.